Hello, I'm Richard Hoover and this is SatTV, and I'm pleased to be joined by Kurt Riegelman from Intelsat. Now Kurt, we've spoken a lot of times.
Yes, sir.
But the satellite industry is going through change and people say it's going to be facing challenges. But what are they?
Well, there's a lot of challenges that we face, but really it's about opportunities as well. So as we look at the markets and the industry in whole, there's a lot of demand growing for a much higher degree of connectivity. And we're seeing a lot of our customers, end users, habits change. So the question becomes, how can the satellite industry best address these trends? And we've seen it from our customer standpoint, we've seen it through the end users, and what we're looking at is how to design new types of spacecraft, new types of access technology, and new types of throughput and efficiencies so that we can address these markets with our customers. So we have to do things much differently than we have in the past.
Now, your colleague Stephen was talking yesterday at one of the events in Singapore, and he was saying that the satellite industry has to diversify, it has to move forward on cost, and it has to be more understandable and easy access to people.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? So if you look at every potential projection of connectivity, the growth is not linear, it's exponential. How does satellite address that? In many cases, our economics and our connectivity is not there. A lot of our customers come back to us and they'll say, I look at satellite and I kind of look at it as my technology of last resort. The historical perception of satellite is it's really not high throughput, it's kind of hard to put in, and it's expensive. So we need to change that paradigm, and that's exactly what we're doing as we go through with EPIC and other technologies. As we look at this, our goal is to create a more higher performance environment with more efficiency, better access, so that we can address more of that connectivity requirement. So if you think about it, our economics have to start moving up that chain so that we can be a bigger part of the pie. We also have to look beyond satellite. I think one big thing and mistake that a lot of satellite operators look at is just thinking of the payload. But what we've spent a lot of time on, based on feedback from all of our service providers, is you have to make the access easier. And that's several things. So we've done things like investing in antenna technology, not to make it just lower cost, but to make it more efficient, and so that we can open up more markets, newer markets. So driving down to 30 centimeter dishes that are efficient to open up business jet, to drive down to things like Chimeta, investments we've made there, so that people can access the space segment, lower cost, self-serving, validating, and get there more rapidly. I think the biggest thing for us is to make sure that a consumer and a service provider can get to the space segment easily. Once you do that and you have the right economics and throughput, then all of a sudden new markets open up.
I'm going to pick you up on one point that you mentioned, which is cost. Now, addressing the perception that satellite is a costly technology is never going to be easy, because most people out there sitting at home, what does satellite mean to them? So how do you really get that message across? How do you educate people to say satellite is a cost-effective alternative?
Yeah, I think it's going to come back to the investments we're making in the broader ecosystem, right? So whether it's the antenna technologies or the platforms that we're putting in place for our service providers. We just announced a platform called Intelsat One Flex for maritime, right? This is about helping our service providers be more CapEx and cost effective so they can enter new markets more rapidly. But what we have to demonstrate to them is the ability to get to a new price per megabit, but also not just the price, but more of the megabits, because everything that we're seeing is large increases in demand for throughput, but it has to be at the right price point. So if I just come in with a lower price for a very small piece of space segment or connectivity, that's not enough. We need scale and pricing. And with EPIC and the investments we're making in our ecosystem, we can get there. And that's what we're talking about with customers now, is how they can scale up and provide much larger. I mean, we're moving away from megabit discussions to gigabyte discussions. And we're moving away from just a space segment discussion to a platform and a hybrid solution that's both fiber and satellite. So we're taking the business in several different directions.
Now, we've heard a lot about EPIC. What's it actually going to bring to the market? What's it going to deliver?
What's it going to deliver? It's going to deliver just performance, new efficiencies, and new access. You know, we're excited. We're kind of in the countdown phase right now to IS 29, which is our first epic, and that's going to launch the first quarter of next year, and then we have 6 more behind it. You know, we've been very clear with our customer set that Epic is not the only solution that we're going to have, right? We're going to continue to use C-band and wide beam for distribution where that makes sense, but high throughput capacity is where we see a lot of the different applications needing to be addressed. So we look at broadband, we look at mobility, cellular backhaul, rural connectivity. To really open up these markets, we have to get to a point where the end user terminal is solar powered, 2-watt buck, very low price to install, so that people can address markets. So if you've got 1,000, 2,000 subscribers or folks in a rural area, and they may have a $4 or $5 ARPU, we can address that now. And this is something that's always been on the fringe, and it hasn't been able to happen. Now we've got low cost, easy to use equipment that can connect and bring that home. So when we look at Epic, you know, we started off as looking at the spacecraft, but what we quickly realized is it has to be in tandem with ground segment and platforms to bring the whole picture together.
Now, a lot of people talk about the borders, and to progress and develop their companies, operators have to go across borders. You're a global satellite operator. Mm-hmm. Borders really don't mean anything to you. So where do you go next?
Next in terms of markets?
Yeah.
Well, I think as we look at our 3 key markets, you know, for the commercial side of the business, there's media, there's broadband, and mobility. We see growth opportunities in all 3. So in media, you know, DTH continues to grow. As we look at globalization of content, Asia Pac is a hotspot for this, right? So it's great. It's a great destination for a lot of content, and then regionalization, as well as a source of content moving out to other parts of the world. We just announced a new release with BT and BBC, so we're serving the BBC with our partnership with BT on a global basis, but really one of the target markets was Asia Pacific. But we're seeing a lot of changes in our consumer trends there. So they're looking at how do they go beyond linear to OTT type applications, and we think satellite has a strong role to play in that part of the market because of the 5 nines, the high reliability, and the ability to be ubiquitous. As we look at mobility, where do we see that going? We see that staying global. You know, there'll be regional providers, but they need help. They need help integrating high throughput into their networks. So we're going to be adding our Intelsat One Flex product so that they can have that as another tool. They can lease megahertz, or they can bring in the Flex product so we can continue to have them grow. You've got a lot of pictures up here about mobility and maritime, and what we're seeing from that segment is we need more connectivity so the ships and everything can be more efficient, better crew welfare. Cruise lines looking to grow because they want to have more social experience. All this content, all this sort of aggregation of content and IP is driving the need for connectivity. And then again on mobility, you know, if you think about new frontiers, like we talked about a little bit earlier with Epic, we're driving into new connectivities, new connections that just couldn't happen before. So how do we serve those rural environments that have just never, ever been able to have a real 2G, 3G, or 4G service? How do we bring Wi-Fi to those locations? Epic's the way that we're going to do it.
Changing track a little bit, what about the fight for spectrum? This is the big thing. It's coming up soon.
Right.
Mobile operators, they're all over it. They need more spectrum. I mean, what's Intelsat's view on this?
Well, you know, we've got 150 days until the WRC event. Our view is that the C-band spectrum is absolutely critical for worldwide connectivity. When you look at what's happening on that, there's no way you can replace that. So every TV channel in the United States first goes over satellite connectivity. When you think about Asia Pacific, you know, ATM networks, oil and gas networks, social community networks that are all on C-band, cellular backhaul. So what's interesting to me is a lot of the IMT folks don't even understand how much of their own business is running on C-band. We have to protect that spectrum. It's not that we don't share, it's just that as we go to share, we need to make sure that our services, which are typically critical and lifeline services, are protected. But we've got to look not only at 15, but beyond into 19 as well. You know, there's just going to be a continued interest, let's say, about our spectrum. So what do we need to do? We need to continue to evolve and, you know, grow our services and be efficient in our use of that spectrum. One of the things that we're doing as we look to launch IS-35E, one of our epics, is it is C-band spot beam. because it's the right solution for that customer set over Africa. So we're looking at how do we continue to be more efficient in C-band, because we think that spectrum is the right solution for a lot of our services, and we're going to protect it.
Now, as an operator, you are very much in the hands of launch providers when you're putting up their new satellites.
Yes.
We've seen the recent failures lately. What's Intelsat's perception? How do you cover yourselves going forward when you need to launch these satellites?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very expensive part of the industry.
Right.
If the launch fails,
Right.
you fail. Your satellite's not up there.
Yeah, look, managing launch providers is a key part of our business. We look for stability and we look for reliability. Right? Those are the two key things. Right now, there is a challenge. We've got two of our infrastructure providers, whether it's Sea Launch or Proton, with failures. So, we are looking at and talking to Ariane. Obviously, we're talking with SpaceX about not only their current vehicle, but the future heavy lift. We need to understand better what other new entrants might be out there. This is a topic that came up yesterday. SpaceX has been a very good exercise in terms of sort of, I'll call it semi-private expedition into launch, and we always look to encourage that. But we do think the current designs are all reliable. We just got to get the repeatability back to the marketplace. So what we typically do, we look at the launch industry, we make several different bets and make sure that we have different options as we go through for each of our spacecraft. But yeah, right now there's a little bit of a challenge there. And so we're very engaged with many of the launch providers on what their next steps are and how they get back to health.
I mean, finally, just looking forward over the next 12 months, we've talked about the challenges. Your colleague Stephen has spoken about the challenges. Right. I mean, let's take Asia, for example. There's a lot of smaller operators. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people vying for business. How does it move forward? Do you see that consolidating? Do you see there, bigger operators in Asia as opposed to the smaller ones? Or?
Well, I think consolidation is a natural act of the market. You're going to have to look forward and project. One of the things we talked about in the event yesterday is that there has been many attempts at consolidation in the Asia-Pacific region, but really regulatory schemes have stopped a lot of it. I don't see that necessarily changing in the next 6 to 9 months or years, so that will have to be addressed. I think when you look at one of the points that Steve was trying to make, as an industry, we need to start thinking bigger scale. If we're a smaller subset of the ICT world, we've got to start thinking about the bigger picture. How do we team together to grow our joint revenues, but also take some of the lead technology out there? So at the end of the day, I think we're going to have to get over some major regulatory issues to see consolidation, but that is a trend I think that makes a lot of sense.
Kurt, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you as always.